mostly raw, living foods, enzyme rich diet. Like that's it for me. My body responds super well to that. And I feel like most people that are dealing with an illness, that tends to be the story.
Welcome to the How I Healed It podcast. Here at How I Healed It, we get to hear stories from those who have healed their bodies from the unhealable through alternative methods and the experts who are passionate about whole body health and healing. As I have been on my own healing journey, I have found that the number one thing that has kept me going is learning from others who have gone before me. I believe we can gain nuggets of wisdom from each healing story that we hear. Thanks in advance for subscribing to our podcast so we can continue to bring these amazing stories. I'm your host, Plantfully Megan. Let's dive in. Hey guys, it's Megan and welcome to the How I Healed It podcast. Today I get the honor of interviewing Hannah Parker. She is a mom and an integrative nutrition health coach. She also healed her body of horrible eczema by adopting a whole foods, plant-based diet and is passionate about disease prevention and reversal through nutrition. Hannah, I'm so excited to have you on. I've been really looking forward to this chat and can't wait to hear more about your story. I'd love to just dive right in if you want to share your story and what brought you to the whole food plant-based diet and your eczema journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Megan. I love what you're doing with this podcast. I think people need to know that healing is possible. So,
yes. Amen to that.
I know, right?
all the healing stories we can get our hands on, the better.
I would have killed for this podcast, a decade ago when I was going through this. So hopefully we can spare a bunch of people the suffering.
Yes, totally. So good.
Yes. So just kind of a snapshot of my journey with eczema specifically. So ever since I was a kid, I had eczema. I'm sure a lot of moms can relate to that with their kids. Like it's more common in childhood. And it started out as just like a few patches on my arm that would kind of like come and go. It would obviously get a lot worse in times of stress. I always noticed. And then kind of all through college, there'd be whole months or even years where it would basically go away, but it would just keep coming back. And it was just kind of annoying more than anything. And I had tried, we went to dermatologists and I tried the cortisone creams and it would maybe soothe it for a little while, but then it seemed to come back with a vengeance, after using that for a few weeks, and then it just wouldn't resolve it anymore. And so then after college, graduated college, got married, and that year, right after college, it just flared up. I mean, just like out of control all over my body. And over the next 2 years, it just progressively got worse and worse to the point where it was out of the realm of, oh, this is kind of annoying. And it was into the realm of like, this is completely debilitating me,
right.
Where, I would try to, and I think you asked me if I had before and after pictures, and I just could not bear to even look at my skin, let alone take a picture. And I really regret that because I wish people could see, even my family, they never really saw it. Only my husband's really the only one who knew how bad it was because I would cover it up. And I remember it was all over my arms, all over my hands. And I remember I started a teaching job. I was teaching 3rd grade at the time. And I remember I would cover like my arms up with my sleeve so that nobody would see it, so that I wouldn't see it. And I lived like that for like an entire year, would not. And I remember trying to teach and hold the marker on the board and it was just such a hard time of like, is this ever going to go away? This is truly affecting. I couldn't sleep because it would itch so bad. And, not to mention all the emotional things that go along with that. It started to get on my eyelids and my neck. So even trying to cover it up, it was just slowly, it just felt like I could not control what my body was doing, which was super terrifying. And so I was like, okay, we've got to figure out a solution to this. And the creams are not doing it. And the doctors are not helping. They're just basically saying there is no cure. There is no cure. There is no cure. So I went a different route. And I can't remember exactly what led me into nutrition. I know like growing up, my mom has kind of started dabbling in alternative medicine, like when I was in high school. So that it was kind of on my radar of like, okay, I had started maybe trying some natural cleansers or soaps or something to help my skin. But it wasn't until that year that it flared up that I started researching nutrition. And this was before Instagram. This was before like YouTube videos. Like this was, 15, maybe 13 years ago. And so it was like books, like reading books. There were a few websites. I had like 2 or 3 people that were really talking and sharing videos about healing their skin. And I would just watch that, nightly almost for encouragement. And then I found, I think my first like company, I guess, that I really started diving into was called Hallelujah Acres. Have you heard of Hallelujah Acres? Okay.
Oh,
Oh
yeah.
my gosh. They don't have a huge like Instagram presence or anything like that. So you wouldn't think they were as powerful as they are, but oh my gosh, like, people have followed their protocols to heal cancer, to heal diabetes, heart disease. I mean, all the things. And so I figured there weren't any stories specifically about eczema, but what I came to realize is it's all the same root. Like it was just coming out in my skin rather than cancer or something else. I also knew that could be a huge prerequisite for a more serious disease. So I truly believe, and this is why I'm so passionate about kid nutrition, like if I hadn't turned my ways, I believe that I would have a more serious illness today.
One thing I wanted to mention to you guys who are listening is I'm about to start offering extended interviews and other exclusive content to our How I Healed It community. So make sure to head over to howihealedit.com. That's howihealedit.com and sign up for our email list so you don't miss out on everything going on over here at How I Healed It. Happy healing out there, you guys. Now let's jump back into this awesome interview.
So yeah, I just realized like the root of most health issues are the same. And that's what's so awesome about applying a plant-based diet or, close to a plant-based diet or whatever it is it's going to hit on whatever you have, right? So it's not like you need a heart disease diet and a cancer diet and an eczema diet. Like it's all the same thing. So yeah, I started the first thing I did was take out dairy because that was pretty commonplace. So like, okay, you have eczema, remove dairy or try to remove gluten. So I tried both of those and it, maybe worked, but that wasn't, I knew that wasn't enough. And so for about a year, it was just me kind of gradually, taking things out, replacing them. And I didn't love my salads. I wasn't loving my food at the time. That has completely changed now for multiple reasons. But at the time, it felt a little bit like torture. Like, okay, like I have to eat this spinach. And, it just felt very restrictive that first year. And to be honest, I wasn't seeing a change in my skin. So that was really challenging. But I knew, I worked, what's funny is I was applying for teaching jobs this was before, that the first year of teaching, obviously, but I was working at a health food store. And I would just stand up at the cash register and read all the books that they had. They had like a huge nutrition section and I would just devour it. And I felt like, I feel like God was really in that because he knew I needed to just take like a year and not teach. Like I was frustrated because I couldn't get a teaching job right out of college. It was like when all the schools were shutting down and whatnot, but it was a huge blessing because I was able to dive into healing my body. And I was kind of piecing together, okay, this nutrient is important for this, and this is a toxin that I gotta get rid of, and, piecing it together. And through working at that health food store, I met someone who was teaching the Hallelujah Acres information. And so I started going to her classes. Like she kind of took me under her wing. She had healed herself from breast cancer on this diet. So I'm like, okay, I have this person right in front of me. And she had a practice in the town we were living in where she would see people with all sorts of diseases. So we had like no money at the time. My husband was in grad school. I was working at a health food store. So I had no money to like pay her. I just kind of learned every scrap of information I could, and started dabbling in it. So that was that first year. The second year was when I started teaching, and the eczema it was just getting worse and worse and worse. Even as I was starting to implement some of these changes. And I remember there was like a turning point for me. I was kind of like sort of all in, but I would like go out with friends and eat all the pizza and the ice cream, and they'll be like, okay, now back on track on Monday, and I knew in the back of my mind, like, Hannah, this is not going to do it. Like, you got to go all in. Like Chris Wark, right? Chris Beat Cancer. He says 99% is hard, 100% is easy.
So true. I 100% agree with that. When I tried I'm like, oh, 90% plant-based, I could do that. I didn't. It was so hard. I was not 90% plant-based. I had to go 100% to make it happen. And then it was easy. Then it was easy.
Then it was easy. It's straightforward. It's like, this is what you do. Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely. So yeah, I had that major turning point. I remember I went with a bunch of teacher friends, and we went to the mall, and we went to like a steakhouse, and I just went all out. Like, I had bread and butter, and of course, like, some people can handle times like that. Like, some people, if you don't have a major illness, you certainly can, and there's a way to gradually do it. But I was to the point where my body could not handle that. And I remember I came home that night, and I was just the most miserable I had been, really, like, just huge flare-ups. And I remember I would take clay baths to soothe my skin. I just remember crying and like being like, something has to change. Like, I literally cannot live like this anymore. And so I felt very clearly like the answer was, you got to just go all in. like you got to treat yourself like you do have a terminal illness, because in a sense it felt like I did, because my life was not vibrant. My life was not abundant. It was characterized by fear and misery, to be honest. And I needed to get that life back. So I talked to my husband, and, I said, I'm going to need your support. Like, when we go to family gatherings, I'm going to have to eat differently. When people come over, we're going to have to eat differently. Like, we're going to be different. And it's not like cool to be different right now. It wasn't popular in any way to eat healthy. But yeah, made that turning point. And so that's when I went all in with like the juicing. And, we can talk about that more too, but started really doing, I think Helly Akers calls it, like, what do they call it? The recovery protocol. I can't even remember now.
Yeah. No, I know what they have different cleanses, and then they have a main one that's like the recovery top tier program.
Right. The top tier program.
It. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Whatever it was called, I decided to just go straight to that one. Awesome. And part of that was like juicing. I know you interviewed Bailey, right, who did the Gerson protocol. Yeah. And so it's very similar to that. And like you do and Chris Wart, most of these are similar. Like, you do a juice at the top of the hour all day long. So you're doing about 12 8-ounce juices. And I would alternate that with their product, which was Barley Max, which was, still had the enzymes in it, Barley Max juice powder.
Yeah, it's dehydrated juice powder with barley and alfalfa in it, or is it just barley greens? Maybe it's just barley greens.
Yeah.
My husband and I do I love their Barley Max, mm-hmm. and we'll do it half and half. They have a Barley Max, just regular plain flavor that it is, and then they have a Barley Max mint. And so we mix those two together, and yeah, they're so yummy. I love them.
I like them too. I've tried to put family members and stuff on it, and they just cannot stand it. So I'm like, I don't know, something about it to me tastes really, really good.
It tastes like healing, even if there's an adjustment period to it. I love that. Okay, I don't want to interrupt.
Yeah, no, you interrupt.
I love where you're going with this, but I love hearing your story, and there's so much even in our journeys that are really similar. I also was a education major and graduated during the time where they weren't hiring any teachers, and And I really, I feel like God gives us breadcrumbs, and one of the breadcrumbs that he gave me was Hallelujah Acres, and it just
Oh my
kept
gosh.
popping up. And so it's really fun to hear your story, because so much of my heart is resonating with it. I'm like, oh, that's where I got introduced to it as well. And actually Chris Wark, who you've mentioned a few times, he has a podcast called Chris Beat Cancer, which I highly recommend. It's so good. He also got introduced to raw foods through
Yes.
Hallelujah Acres and George Malcolmus
Yep.
and all of the people who healed through there. And my husband, his what really was the kicker for me was actually a friend of theirs who I'm really hoping I get to interview one of these days. Down in Costa Rica, he had stage 4 cancer, and he did the Hallelujah Acres protocol, and he's a friend of the family, and he healed. And when you meet those people, like you said, you met the friend who healed the cancer, I feel like it's just a natural thing to connect the dots. Well, like, if people are healing cancer,
Yeah.
then I can heal this. And there's no healing protocol that I've seen that heals the way that a raw food diet or a Gerson therapy, in where you're preserving the enzymes in your primarily plant-based diet, heals. The longevity, the stories, they're just unrivaled. They are all in this plant-based camp, which I'm a proponent of healing, whatever that looks like. This podcast is not about vegan. It's not about whatever direction, however you healed. But it just seems that so many of the stories land in this generalized area of a whole food plant-based diet,
Yes.
nutrition dense, organic, getting back to the way that God created us to eat, which is from the fruit of the tree and the seeds and nuts of the field and all of that. So it's really fun hearing your story.
Yes.
I'm so excited. I'm so excited.
Amazing.
I know others are so excited as well as they're listening.
That's so, I had no idea that we align in so many of those things. I thought no one had really heard of Hallelujah Acres at this point, but I think you're right. I think it really was like the source. If you go to all these people that are doing this, they probably got their source and their start from them, which is awesome.
So awesome.
Yes. Yes.
So
well,
good.
and I love what you said too. This is jumping around a little bit, but about how it seems to always come back to that plant-based nutrition. Because, I'll go back, I can, retrace back to where it finally healed. But I will say, after I did heal, I thought, well, maybe I can get off of this plant-based diet now. Maybe I can go back to eating. And that was always the first question from friends and family was, okay, so now can you do this? Can you eat this now? And I thought, well, maybe I can. And so I did. And it all came back with a vengeance.
Right.
And then it took about 3 months that time. The original healing time was 8 months of following the really intense protocol. And then it was gone for a couple years. So I thought, okay, maybe I'll dabble in just a normal diet again. I mean, I'm still relatively healthy, but, nothing like I was doing. And it came back. And then 3 months on the intense protocol, it went away, and I haven't looked back since because I'm not going to go through that again.
Because we like to wear our swimsuits in the summertime and not have to wear long sleeves all the time. Yes,
exactly.
That's amazing. Okay, so you were doing their protocol, which can you tell us more about the protocol and what those 8 months those 8 months and then the 3 months again of healing looked like, and what it looked like for your healing story there?
Absolutely. So yeah, the big part was the juicing, obviously. But I think there's a misconception, and even people around me thought, oh, are you just juicing? Like, are you going to shrivel away and not eat? And certainly not. That was not the case at all. I would get up in the morning before my teaching job and juice a bunch. Green juice I would juice. I think it was like cucumbers, celery, kale, lemon. And then I kind of did the Chris Work thing where then I would cut it with carrot juice, so half and half of all that. It turned a lovely brown color, Yeah. But that's okay. So yeah, I would juice, and then I would pack that in a cooler to bring to school with me. My third graders, were always like, what on earth are you doing? But yeah, so I did that. And then for breakfast, I would have a smoothie, and that the green smoothies, I feel like that was where I started even before the juice was okay, realizing how greens and the chlorophyll was so cleansing and nutrient mineral rich. Like I was just really drawn to that initially. And so I would made it very simple. It was like banana, spinach, maybe some frozen berries. I mean, now I feel like I do all sorts of recipes, but back then, it was very, very simple. And I really did the same thing every day. I know Chris Work talks about that too. Like, he just did the same thing every day because you don't have energy to switch it up with a bunch of recipes when you're healing. And then I would do a big salad every night. Awesome. So I ate really light during the day. I would maybe do like an apple or some fruit. But for I would do my juice for lunch. On my lunch break at school, I would do my smoothie. And that was just, speaking of like the social implications of this, that was very hard because everybody's meeting in the teacher's lounge to enjoy their big lunches. And I honestly, quite frankly, I would just stay in my classroom during that year and drink my smoothie because I didn't want to answer a bunch of questions of like, why are you drinking this mason? Why did you bring a mason jar of green smoothie? And at the time, like, I felt like I was on the right track, but it's not like the healing had come yet. And so I wasn't living proof yet. It was like, are you kind of crazy? And of course I had 100 doubts, as I would have moments of like, this is going to happen. I can't tell you how many conversations, my husband, Chris I think your husband's name is Chris too, right?
He is. Yeah.
It's a great name. Great husband.
It's a great name for good husbands.
But I mean, he would talk so many times of like, Hannah, this is going to work. Like he had to be that voice for me so many times. But there were obviously so many doubts too. So yeah, I would just hide in my classroom and I would drink my smoothie. And I did that for a year. And then I would go home and eat a giant salad. I mean, like a bowl this big. And it was so exciting because I hadn't eaten a lot of solid food throughout the day. And so I would just eat all sorts of vegetables, and it was so good. And then at this point I loved my salads. Like they were so tasty, and your taste buds change and you start to crave it. And I think that's something that people don't realize. Like it's a beautiful thing that happens is it starts to taste amazing. And so that was that made it so much easier because I actually started falling in love with it. And I feel like, oh man, I mean, there are just so many blessings in that year that I can think back of where even before the healing came, like I was healing my relationship with food. I was finding joy in it. I was finding other people that were finding joy in it. Maybe people that didn't necessarily have an illness, but were talking about how fun it is to make healthy food. And so I started viewing it as abundance rather than restriction. And I feel like that had to happen before. I couldn't just be like, this is my medicine. It is medicine, but I had to view it as this is so fun and this is so delicious. And this is taking my life somewhere other than just fixing my skin.
Beautiful. I love that. 'Cause you can't make a radical change like that and not be transformed. And you see it on both sides. I think I've seen where people who they're excited about like, oh, I'm going to make a change. And there is that always nagging thing in the back of your head. And you even mentioned you had this where it's like, well, then I'll go back to being normal. Right. Like if I want to lose all this weight, or if I want to heal my body of XYZ, whatever it is you're healing of, it's like, well, then I'll go back to normal. But I think really what is happening is to have a different result, you actually have to change everything about who you are. And so when you hear lifestyle change, it's like I feel like that word has been used so much, but it's really like your life is changing. Who you are is changing in the process. And to be committed to that process means you will be a different person on the other side. And who's left behind is an old version of yourself. And that version of yourself had the disease. And this version of yourself moving forward, who is now a new person, is made new in all ways, body, soul, and spirit. You really are transformed by it.
Absolutely. That is so well said. So true.
Yeah, I love that. It's so beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
When did you start to notice the change in your skin?
Yes.
And that shift into I'm healed?
Yes. I love that question because it was significant. So, as I said, it was all over. And so certain areas of my body were worse than others. And the first thing I noticed, there were patches on my arms that would just get lighter and it wouldn't burn as much at night. And they talk about like the healing crisis where it's not linear, right? Like it goes away and then, your body's dumping toxins. And that's a huge thing with skin. If anybody does not know that is dealing with skin issues, it's your body essentially trying to rid itself, so you need to optimize your digestion. You need to get on top of those things. And that's the only way it's truly going to heal. But I would notice those healing crises were just when it would go away, it would last longer. And there were times when I thought maybe we're good and then it would come back. And so if anybody's listening that is in the throes of that, like, keep going, like, do not stop because you are almost there. And if you stop too soon, you're not going to see the fruits of your labor of sticking that out. And that's the thing. I didn't really have anybody telling me that at the time. And so I just kind of had to believe it, and I'm really glad that I did. So yeah, it would kind of gradually get better. And then about like maybe 6 months in, it was pretty much gone except for my hands and like this spot under my chin that just would not budge. It was just so bad. It was like a severe burn almost is how I describe it. And I still couldn't use my hands. And I mean, I could go on and on about like dreams I would have about my hands, God was using that to kind of, and that's a whole other aspect of what it does with your faith, right? Of going through something like this. But yeah, my hands just couldn't heal. And so I would still cover them up. And, I remember, this may seem silly, but there was like, I don't know if when you were teaching, if you ever had to do this, but I had to do like a restraint course where you learned how to like restrain children, if they were being aggressive in the classroom or things like that. And I was dreading this training because I knew that I would have to use my hands and I didn't want to have to, roll my sleeves up, and I knew I was going to have to. And so I had signed up for this training. It was like mandatory. I had to do it. And I remember just praying like, God, heal my skin by this training. Like it was maybe fall, maybe November of the school year. I had been through it had been a full school year and then another half of a school year of implementing some of this stuff. And I remember, just praying that would finally go away. And by the first day of the training was the first day. I mean, it could not have been more miraculous, really. That was the first day I was able to roll my sleeves up and do this training. And what's funny, my friend, I'm going to be sending this to her, but my friend Erin Jones, we went to a Carrie Job concert the night before. And Carrie Job was a huge, like her song, is it Healer? I forget what it's called, something about God being your healer. And that was like my go-to song. I mean, if I was ever discouraged or doubting, I would just blare that. I would sing it on the way home from school. That was it. And so I got to go and worship with her, like essentially healed, like the very next day. Yeah. And it was just awesome.
Wow.
Yeah. It was
That is
so cool.
amazing. I love that because your hands could be free in worship, and
Yes,
just the
yes,
timing, all of that is just so
absolutely.
beautiful. And now, had that spot under your chin gone away as well at that time?
That I can't quite remember if that was still around or not, but that they were right there, right close to each other. But I remember
Wow.
at the start of that school year, just yeah, it was so painful and like just so uncomfortable, and it would slowly fade. I want to say that was still around, and it was the very last thing. And so then finally that just went away, and all of a sudden, in some ways it felt instantaneous, like, oh, it's gone. And in some ways it was like, wow, that was 8+ months of seeing it gradually go away. And then I don't remember the exact moment of realizing it, but I remember Chris and I just going like, it's gone. Like it is gone. I can't believe it's gone. Like it worked. We weren't crazy. Like it was real.
One of the things I love that you touched on is the healing crisis. And if you're new to a healing journey, you may begin to hear that phrase more. Some people will even call them Herxheimer
Yes.
reactions. And a lot of people who are on a healing journey, whenever they're going through healing, they might have a moment of relief and then a resurgence, and sometimes worse than
Yes.
ever, resurgence
Mm-hmm.
of whatever it is that they're battling, and even additional symptoms. And it's really tempting in those moments. And I myself have had those moments, and
Mm-hmm.
it's really tempting to give up because you think, oh, it didn't work. It's not working. What's the point? I'm going to go back to eating in and out because this thing isn't working. And if you can hang on in those moments and have the people set up who can champion you on to continue, it's a huge deal. Dr. Dale Figtree, I did an interview with her, and she has an amazing story of that same thing happening, where
Wow.
she was actually symptom free of her cancer, and he like essentially healed with, and then there was a huge resurgence, and literally she thought she was going to die,
Oh my
and
goodness.
had went to the hospital, was having all these detox reactions, and it mimicked what her symptoms were when she had gone through chemo and radiation. And then she turned the corner and she healed. And granted, I'm not saying don't have your doctors monitor you if you're going through something that potentially looks life-threatening. Absolutely be monitored. But definitely when you're going through a healing journey, it has its ups and downs before the end result makes
Yeah,
itself known. So I
exactly.
love that you shared that.
Yes,
I
yes.
love
And
that.
I really do think that was the hardest part, understandably, because you do start to question.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's fascinating that you've heard that from other people too. And I think that is a very real
Yeah.
thing. And I think it's kind of like, they talk about like in labor, like when you feel like you're about to give up, that's when the baby's about to be born. Like, I feel like that's
Yeah.
actually very similar in this situation. Like, that's actually a really good sign, that you're close. Like you
Wow.
just push through because you're almost there.
Wow. That's really, really good. Or like me on the end of a hike when I'm just like, I'm done. But really, the summit is right there. Always, it's just 5 minutes away at that point. Awesome. That's so amazing. So then after that 8 months and you saw things cleared up, when did you start thinking, okay, now I'm just going to go back to eating what is culturally acceptable? Because I would say it's still hard to make these changes.
Yes, it
It
is.
was
It's
even
very hard.
harder 10 and 15 years ago, but it's still not easy to make these big life
Right.
changes.
Exactly. Yes. So I think it was about 2 years. So I kind of stuck with it. We were living in Kansas at the time. We moved to Indiana. I started, at a different school. It was so awesome to just have eczema totally in the rearview mirror. But I stuck with it because I knew something just told me I needed to stick with it.
Yeah.
So it was maybe like, 2 years in that I thought, well, maybe I can like incorporate chicken and eggs and some wine and some fish. And, I was still pretty it was very healthy by anybody's standards.
Yeah.
But no, I could not. Like, my body said no. And it was very quick. I'm glad I tried, because had I not done that, I maybe would have questioned, is this worth it? Is this worth being different from everybody around me? Is it worth, like you said, it's so much easier to just do what the culture's doing and eating. And so that was actually great confirmation that this is it. And then, yeah, like I said, it took less time to go away that time. It only took 3 months, but that was 3 months that I could have not experienced it, but it definitely taught me something. And yeah, so I feel like there's been times even since then that I thought, well, maybe I can kind of ease up, or, times I've thought, well, maybe I should include some meat for nutritional reasons or things like that. And again, like you said, I think that people can heal on a variety of variations of this. But for me personally, I have always come back to that. Yeah. Mostly raw living foods, enzyme rich diet. Like, that's it for me. My body responds super well to that. And I feel like most people that are dealing with an illness, that tends to be the story.
Yeah, it really does. It unrelentingly seems to be the story. It's really interesting. That's so beautiful. So what is a day in the life of eating look like for Hannah Parker right now?
Right now. Okay, I'll give you an ideal day. When I used to work with clients, I would say, okay, give me like your best day, and then give me like because like nobody has a perfect day every day, right?
Right.
But nobody has
true.
a poor day every day. They would be afraid to tell me what they ate. I'm like, just give me both ends of the spectrum here. But an ideal day for me would be starting with like some lemon water typically, and then usually like a big green juice. Sometimes I'll make carrot juice to have throughout the day. It really I have a baby and a 3-year-old now, so life looks a little different. But we usually start the day with juicing. Then I'll have a big smoothie for breakfast. Whereas I used to have that for lunch. So now I just eat more now than I used to, which is great. So I drink a big smoothie, usually with lots of greens, banana, frozen fruit, berries. And then for lunch, I have a giant salad. I try to do that every single day, just packed with as many things as I can, fruit and stuff throughout the day. And then usually at dinner time, we'll do a cooked meal now. Whereas I used to be, in the throes of healing, it was mostly raw. Like once in a while I would have like some sweet potatoes or something. But now with my family, like we typically will cook something. And it's nice to have the freedom. And that's one thing to mention too, is even though I still stick to a plant-based, whole food plant-based, it's not as rigid as it once was. Like it was very rigid. Now I can have, desserts, and I can do some of these things that my body couldn't handle back then, once you kind of get it over the edge of that healing. So really I'm still in parameters, but I'm not, it's very abundant at this point in time.
That's really good. How do you feed your kids? I think that there's a lot of young moms who have transitioned into whole food plant-based, as it's even got more popular with things like forks over knives and Game Changers, making it more mainstream. What have you found to be a great way to incorporate dense nutrition as you're raising your little ones?
Yeah. Super passionate about that. Naturally, so my daughter is 3. My son just started eating solids, so he's super easy right now. But what I found with her is, naturally she's going to eat what I'm eating, just because I'm not going to cook 2 meals. And because the heart of what I believe, is very nutritious, is going to be mostly plant-based foods. So, so she really eats what I eat, and always has, since she started eating solid food. So she does the juices, she does the smoothies. We're working on salads. It's, every week we expose her to that. we find the veggies that she likes, which right now are tomatoes and cucumbers, and we do a bunch of those, and avocados, and we keep exposing. But yeah, she mostly eats whole food, plant based, and I don't know when. I know there will be a point where it's her decision.
Yes.
and we'll cross that bridge when we get there, but right now I get to basically decide what is served, and so I want her to become accustomed to that. I feel like I've read there's a book by Dr. Furman called Disease Proof Your Child, and he talks about what you eat in childhood is what that's your comfort food, right? Like there's a reason I crave spaghetti when I'm stressed because that was my comfort food. But how awesome would it be if our kids' comfort food was healthy? So even if when it's her decision, if she, wants to go to McDonald's or, totally veer off the way she was raised, I feel like her taste buds and her body are going to bring her back to those foods. Even if she veers away, when it's in her court. Yeah. I feel like, there's a point where I'm going to have to release that into her hands. And I believe that her body will naturally draw her back to those nourishing foods. And if she has to go on a little journey to realize that, I think that, you feel differently when you eat this way. And when you veer off of it, you just don't feel good. And I think that if she's grown up, and not just her, but my son too, when he starts eating, if they've grown up eating nourishing food, they're going to miss it. They're going to want it. Even if they don't necessarily follow 100% whole food, plant-based diet into adulthood, I think their body is naturally going to be drawn to those foods.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And in my opinion, what an upper hand they have eating those nourishing foods, because who knows, you never know. This is the hard thing about preventative health is you never know the diseases you missed out on. And I really wish that I had missed out on my endometriosis journey, but there's no way that you can rewind time and redo that, but you get to launch your kids into the future with that really, really incredible baseline, and for them to crave a smoothie and cucumbers and tomatoes and not roasted chicken, or even things that are healthy but might not be health healing to the body, is just so incredible. I love that. That's so amazing. So I know that you have some experience with coaching people in thyroid, taking care of their thyroids. I would love to dig into that a little bit. Can you teach us about a healthy thyroid and what it looks like to regain thyroid health?
Yes. It's been several years now since I've done this, so I'm a little rusty on it, but I'll kind of try to recall what I remember.
Awesome.
It was a huge part of my life at the time. I feel like all I was learning was about thyroid. But yeah, so kind of what got me started with that is I was realizing before I narrowed down to thyroid disease, I was working with, clients from all different health issues, weight management, all sorts of stuff. And it kind of all went back. Like there was a common denominator where most of those women had a thyroid imbalance. And so I realized this is affecting so many things, and the symptoms can look so different depending on the person. There's hypo, there's hyper, there's the Hashimoto's with the autoimmune component. So yeah, I was just realizing whoa, this is a huge problem. And if we can address the thyroid, then a lot of these other health issues are going to clear up. So I don't know. Are you familiar with Dr. Isabella Wentz?
No, I'm not.
Oh, okay. Well, if you are interested in anything thyroid, go to her.
Awesome.
She came out with a documentary called The Thyroid Secret. She was a pharmacist, I believe, and she had severe, I think it was Hashimoto's,
Okay.
and, reversed it or, managed it with a diet. And hers was not whole food plant-based. It was mostly, but it was also including some meat, and that was part of the protocol too. So that was always actually, to be honest, a little challenging for me when I was working with clients, because personally I was, really sold on the whole food plant-based.
Right.
Whereas a lot of the thyroid and autoimmune stuff was kind of like the GAPS diet and the AIP. But that's where I kind of,
Paleo, I see a lot
yes,
in that,
paleo.
and
Mm-hmm.
FODMAP diet, all those
Yes,
seem to come up.
exactly. All of that. And so that was a huge point where I had to kind of reconcile kind of what you were saying was, okay, it doesn't have to be just this way. Like,
Right.
obviously people can heal on a variation. So anyway, I really just tried to get them to eat more vegetables. Like, it was like, okay, we don't need to label this diet anyway. Like, let's just get you a big salad in the day and a big smoothie and a juice. And they were seeing changes with their symptoms, and their
That's
their lab work
amazing.
was changing. And
Wow.
yeah, it was
That is
super,
so
super awesome.
awesome.
Mm-hmm.
What was the name of the person you recommended again?
Yeah, Dr. Isabella Wentz.
Okay,
I
cool.
think it's,
That's awesome.
yeah, I can't remember if it's WENZ or TS. I think it's with a Z.
Okay, cool. I'll have to look into that more. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Cool. Anything else that you want to touch on before we go, or any last encouraging words for those who might find themselves on a healing journey or with eczema right now as they're listening?
I mean, what I would have loved for someone to like take my shoulders and look me in the eye and say, what it would probably just be like, you can heal. Like, you're not nuts, and this isn't a pipe dream, and your body 100% can heal. No, you know, obviously I'm speaking from my experience with eczema, but I really do believe that you give it the right tools, your body knows how to do the healing. And it might take some time. It will take some time. You know, it definitely will, but it's worth the fight. And it is totally possible.
For those who have shifted their diet before or maybe have never shifted their diet to something outside of a cultural norm, do you have any words of wisdom for what it looks like to navigate that now that you've been in this lifestyle for a while? Did it get better for you, even the social anxiety around your meals and things? I would love to hear that.
Oh, that is such an important, it's so important. I think overlooked because, you know, it sounds great on paper. But when you go out and there's the peer pressure, and, you know, no matter how old you are, there's always peer pressure. Right. So, yes, it has gotten so much easier. I mean, it's been a process, but I feel like my friends have been so amazing. For any of my friends listening, shout out to you guys, because truly, like, I feel like having friends that support you and how you're eating, even if they don't eat that way, like, that was always my prayer. Like, yes, in an ideal world, everybody would eat the same way I'm eating and I wouldn't have to bring my own food to things. But the second best thing is to have friends that love you and support you, even if you bring your own food to dinner, you know? And so find those people, and know, like, obviously know your why, like, know why. You have to know why you're different, and you're fighting for something very valuable, which is your health and your life. And to compromise that just for the sake of fitting in or not looking, you know, looking different from other people, like, look at what you're giving up if you do that, you know? So if you want to bring your best to your friendships and to your life, like, it's worth going against the grain and being different.
Really good. So well said, Hannah. I've found too that if I show up whenever I first shifted and was eating more plant-based, and if I showed up kind of insecure or not confident about the way that I was eating, then people pick up on that and I would get teased more, and there would just be a different heart posture around it. Whereas now, when I show up, I'm very confident and very strong in, this is why I'm eating this way. This is why I'm doing this way. And people, if you're confident and you're strong in it, people will be strong and confident in it with you. So I think that there's something to be said about that, how important it is to show up with confidence. And oftentimes, even still, if you're very strong and confident in how you're eating and the way you're showing up, and people are still giving you a hard time, it, generally speaking, has nothing to do with you. It usually is their own insecurity or their own intuition nagging at them that they need to make a change, and they haven't been willing to swim upstream for it. Well, thanks again so much, Hannah, for being on. It was so fun hearing your story about eczema and just learning from you on your healing journey. If you want to follow Hannah's story continually, go and give her a follow on Instagram at disease.proof.kids. And I'll put all the places you can connect with her and some of the things we talked about in the show notes today. It was so great having you on. And thanks so much for those who are listening. If you've enjoyed this podcast and would like to hear more healing stories and expert interviews, please be sure to give us a follow along. Share this podcast with others so we could get these healing stories out there. They can be so life-changing. Make sure to subscribe to our channel, and we'll see you guys next time.